What's up, everyone? Music Man Spence here. Thanks for tuning in to the channel. Um, yeah, be sure to like, share, subscribe, donate blood, all that good stuff for the YouTube and social media algorithms. Got to keep the social media gods happy, and I would like to make some money off this at some point. Anyways, so I had a couple of people asking me about my Christmas rock opera album that I did, or it's more of an EP. But a lot of people were asking me about what type of plug-in instruments I'm using and how I go about, composing and mixing and recording all that. So I figured I would just make a little video here dissecting one of those songs, Carol of the Bells. So yeah, well, let's just dive into it, and I'll just kind of explain that. And so if you're, whether you're, a rock guy or a metal guy who wants to get it into adding more elements, like more orchestral and more electronica elements, or if you're just a musician who wants to get into home recording and isn't sure where to start, this will help you with that. So first, let's start with the DAW. I am a Reaper guy. I love Reaper. I find the workflow to be very easy. I started on Pro Tools, but still to this day, I find Reaper just so much more easy to use, and the workflow so much more faster, as well as just it's very customizable. Like this whole color scheme, the way I have it set up, and with all these icons and stuff. Reaper's great. It does everything Pro Tools does, and you don't have to refinance your house to afford it. It's free, basically. You should pay for it. There's a paid license. Kakos is a great company for allowing people to use Reaper for free. But yeah, it's dirt cheap, so you should try it out if you haven't yet. So I'm going to go ahead here and just start with our, play the track, start with the first set of instruments that we got here. Got some sleigh bells, good old Christmas vibes. And then come in with the handbells. So before we go any further with that, I want to explain this, because if you're, let's say you want to compose some Christmas music, or, doing any sort of, even if you're doing like foliage or any sort of, background stuff for Christmas media, this would be a good thing to check out and get into. So for my sleigh bells, I've actually got two instruments here that I'm using. A lot of times layering stuff together is where you get the real meat and the real magic when it comes to instruments and VSTs. So the first thing I got here is Nexus ReFX. And I use this a lot. It's got great stuff, everything from synths to orchestral sounds. It's not as realistic as, say, a lot of Spitfire or a lot of Contact native instrument stuff, but the variety that's in here is great. So I've got, this is under the XP Christmas package, and there's a Jingle Bells sound there. So that by itself sounds like this. And then the second thing I have here is sleigh bells sound. I'm going to mute the handbells. This is from Spitfire, and this is Spitfire Labs, which is a free plugin. Let me solo this. And so if I add this, you see how I've layered that. Now I've got much thicker sleigh bells. And there's all kinds of really cool sounds you can download for Spitfire Labs for free and get started with cool, realistic sounds there. And so for the handbells, I've got these guys right here. This is also, I believe, from Spitfire. Yes, it is. So this is Spitfire's BBC Orchestra. This is the core version. They have a couple different versions. There's a free version, and then core is like the middle budget one. This is tubular bells, and you got all the orchestral elements you're going to need here. Everything from, you got violins, violas, cellos, basses. You got the horn sections, all your brass and trumpets, your flutes, your woodwinds. So much here. It's a playground for somebody who likes orchestral stuff. And I'm using the tubular bell sound for that, for those handbells. And one thing you'll notice too with a lot of my instruments, I've just got the dynamics up all the way. I'm not doing a whole lot of like tweaking with all this. It's mainly just kind of how it comes with some reverb and compression and things like that, which I'll get into later. So the next part We got our piano that comes in, and that I used grand piano setting from Addictive Keys. I love Addictive Keys. Once again, very minimal things I'm doing with the settings. And then our strings I got down here. BBC Orchestra again, cellos. This singing choir. Nexus 3 FX, and this is from the Hollywood 2 core library. This choir sound there. And percussion's about to kick in here, so we got good stuff. This snare is also Nexus 3 FX, Hollywood drums, military snare. This right here, I'm going to solo this. This is the heavier percussion. Nexus 3 FX again, Hollywood 2 drums. We got this sound. Lots of really good stuff to work with there. One of these days I'll do a video going through the different sounds and whatnot. If you guys want, by all means, let me know in the comments. For now, I'm just kind of going over what I used. And then one thing I want to point out too is this really low-end boom. This kind of use that just on the low end for on those downbeats. And that's a fun little built-in plugin here called Resamplomatic 5000 that Reaper has. And so I'm just importing this, I don't even know how to pronounce that, Gernardine. It's a sample I got from Impact Soundworks, which I'll explain that instrument in a little bit. But yeah, you can just upload waves, MP3s, AA files, any type of audio. Resamplomatic will read it, and you can turn it into an instrument, basically. You can tweak the sound and, you know, extend it, elongate it, things like that. And yeah, so all that together, I'm going to just solo the percussion section. Lots of cool stuff there, and then with everything together. Also, one thing I want to point out is my low end here in this orchestration. So I'm going to mute my synth bass that I have here. And it still sounds good, but it sounds a little empty, like something's missing here. Now when I put this back in, I'll play it again from the beginning. So much more thick with it. So if you like to experiment with orchestral sounds, this is kind of one of that, you know, those ideas of the hybrid sound of the classic orchestra with a low-end synth bass. You could do this with like a bass guitar or, you know, the double bass, but it just doesn't have the sustain or the same sound that you would get out of this. What I'm using here is I'm using Juggernaut from Impact Soundworks. It's a Contact instrument plugin. And yeah, just bass Juggernaut. Now, that low-end bass boom that I have in my percussion is actually a sample I pulled from this, which is what's really cool about Impact Soundworks, is when you buy one of their VST instruments, they actually give you the raw audio samples with it too, so you can play around with those however you want. Yeah, just a good old... yeah, it's those low-end sounds we want there. But yeah, that's that. So let's get into the rest of this here. And now comes what I call the scary strings. This is from Spitfire Labs again here. Got this cool little sound. You get an amplified cello quartet, the evil setting. And that's literally just me chromatically stacking strings. Get that horror movie vibe. And then, oh, forgot to point out, oh, we're stuck in a loop. There's this rolling percussion sound here that, oh yeah, I also got this from Nexus 3 FX, the Hollywood drums. We got this rolls menu, as it's called. So you get that nice little kettle drum roll that you'd get. BBC Orchestra has that as well too, but it sounds a bit different. I use that in a different track, and I'll probably dissect that one in a future video. So yeah, now here comes the rock and roll stuff. So let's start with our drums. Oh, whoops, that's just the drums buzz. So what I'm using here is Get Good Drums Invasion. So this is a great instrument here, Get Good Drums Invasion. If you like heavy metal, hard rock drums, a nice thumpy but also snappy kick. Oh, there we go. This is perfect for that. I also do use a lot is the Abbey Road drum collection from Contact, but that's, I use that for other stuff like more R&B or jazz. If I want something nice and punchy, it's definitely Invasion Get Good Drums is my go-to for this sort of thing. Nice cool snare, and you got all these fun options for different things here. We got this different things you can choose here. Go back to the full kit, but yeah, I'm gonna go back to that Tasmanian Blackwood that it was set on. Okay, and then so we just listened to that. Let's check out our guitars. So I'm using Soldano from Neural DSP. If you're doing anything, so yeah, Neural DSP, Soldano, anything heavy, metal, hard rock, I'm always using this. It's just got great sound to it. You could pretty much, bypass having to record with a guitar amplifier. There's all kinds of cool sounds you can get with this. But if I'm doing clean guitars, I'll probably go with something different. Maybe, S-Gear Scuff'em amplifiers. I'll show you that in another video. But yeah, let's continue on with our bass sound here. We got, so I got 2 layers here. I got the main one where I've got my bass amp. This is a Ampeg Sim VS SVT3 Pro from Brainworks. Sounds great. And then I've got this bass fuzz here, which is, I'm using the Ampeg as well, but I'm layering it with this distortion plugin, Black Distortion from Brainworks. So if I take away the fuzz, just your typical bass sound, add the fuzz, just the fuzz. Orchestra's back in. Cool. So I'm gonna go over effects too that I'm using as well as the instruments. So my reverbs, the 2 that I use most is I got Pro R. This is from FabFilter. FabFilter is great for mixing, mastering, all that good stuff. I'm gonna get into that a little bit here as I explain my method for mixing this track. But Pro R is great. You got all those different space options, distance, brightness, very versatile EQ. And then for that, I use that for my bigger, like really big reverb sounds. Let me solo it real quick, actually, so you can hear it. It's with the orchestra. I use it a lot more. There it is on the piano. Choir singing into it. And then so for my drum reverb, I'm using... this is Valhalla Vintage Verb. Valhalla's got great reverbs. I'm just using a quick sort of like plate verb with that. I actually only have it on the snare too for this track. And then this other plate verb I got here, I got my guitars running to that. And that's also Valhalla Vintage Verb. Cool. And a couple of things here. Running low on battery. I'm actually going to... Give me just a second. I got to plug in my battery because my computer is running low here. Okay, anyways, back on track. So what I've got down here underneath my reverbs, I've got two different buses. I've got my instrumental bus and what I call a submix, which is basically just a master bus before it hits a master bus, and I'll explain that in a second. So what I like to do is I like to separate my instruments from my drums. So like the instrumental bus is just everything that's just instruments. And my submix is everything with the drums. So this may not be a conventional way of doing mixes, but there is no right way to do it. Just, different ways to experiment and get different sounds. Let's go ahead and start with drums. I usually start by mixing drums first. So I'm going to go ahead and play the drums, and I'm going to take all of my plugins off of my drum bus. So that sounds all right, it gets the job done. But then I add some multiband compression, get a little more thump out of the kick on the low end, as you can see here, and a little bit more sizzle out of the cymbals. Add some compression, make it thicker, louder, all this. And you'll notice a lot of this is coming from FabFilter. I love FabFilter, great plugins to mix with. So got some compression there. I also have got ozone isotope. Right here, I'm just using a limiter on this to really put a peak on my drums. Actually, that should be, yeah. And then by bringing down the ceiling, it helps fatten that up a bit. Bringing it up. So put that at about 2, where it was. And then here, this Pro Q, I'm just using as you can see, I don't have any settings. I'm just using it as an RTA analyzer so I can see how much low end I got, how much high end I got. And this is great, so when you're mixing, especially on your master bus, you can just see, oh, I got too much low end, I got too little low end, and things like that. So, yeah, so once I got my drums nice and mixed, then I move on to my bass here, because, here, let's throw our drums in too. And I'm going to go to my submix because I want to check out, once again, my RTA analyzing. Okay, if I need more of something or less of something. You'll also notice I've got, aside from EQ, compression, multiband compression from FabFilter, I've got some sidechain compression here. This is just Recomp, which is just a standard plugin here in Reaper. And I've got it set up from... It's taking an auxiliary feed from the kick drum. So if I click on here in my routing, you can see it's receiving from the kick. And what that's doing is I have it assigned to my external inputs here. And then that's... So every time the kick drum hits, it slaps the bass down so that I can turn the bass up and get more full, but when the kick comes in, the low end doesn't overload. So it's a nice way to really balance your mix. Yeah, like you really want to be sidechaining a lot of instruments together when you want certain instruments to stand out over others. And the kick drum and bass are perfect examples because you want a lot of low end from your kick, or you want the low end from your bass, but you also want the low end from your kick, and they're going to fight each other for it. So if you use sidechain compression on your kick to push that bass down when the kick comes in, they get to share that space a lot better, and you can turn them both up and make your track louder without overloading. That's a whole nother video in itself, though, teaching sidechain compression, but I use it on everything. Like my guitars, for example. Let me solo those guys. My rhythm guitars, if you look here, once again, I've got sidechain compression. When the lead guitars come in, when the snare hits, it pushes it down a bit, so that way my lead guitars can punch out over my rhythms and as well to the snare, because the snare sits right in the middle as well where the rhythm guitars would be, so they're fighting for that space. So when that snare pops in, it pushes everything out of the way so it can get it for that quick second. My overheads, same thing. I use sidechain compression from the snare, so that way when that hits, I'm not overloading the high end there. Also, Let me go ahead and show you here on my drum overheads. So if you hear that, I'm using the Isotope Stereo Imager, Maximizer, and Exciter. If I get rid of that, see, I just lost a lot of depth that I would have in my overheads. But I put that back in. This Exciter adds a lot more oomph and sizzle to that. Stereo Imager takes what's kind of sitting right down the center and it spreads it out more to the sides. And then Maximizer just adds more layers to it there. Cool, so that's yeah, most of what's going on there. The last thing I wanted to show you is, here it is. It is the cello. So, or not that cello track, this one. Wait for the wheel. There we go. So, of course, using BBC Orchestra Core here for my cello sound, but I'm also got, from FabFilter, I'm using Saturn 2, a saturation plugin. So if you just listen to the cello, I'm going to solo this. So I'm going to take the saturation off. And then add it. It's a very subtle difference, but putting that saturation in really adds more, I'd say it adds not just more body, but like more of a plosive to it. It makes that bowing sound stick out a bit, and it makes your strings sound a bit more realistic. And so if you have a track where you're doing orchestral stuff, it's great to use saturation on your strings because it'll really beef them up quite a bit. It's almost like, turning up a preamp on a microphone input or something. And so it's a great way if your mix sounds really thin, using saturation on different tracks. I use saturation on my snare and my kick too, actually. Here, let me go there. So you'll see on my kick drum, I've got that as well. I've got FabFilter Saturn. Let's listen to that real quick. So here's my kick drum. Oh. So without that, with it, get a lot more high-end slap and a lot more low-end punch on there. So yeah, saturation's a great thing to start working with. FabFilter's Saturn saturation is great for that. It's a nice way to just really thicken up and beef up any instrument track that you already have. Yeah, and then just last thing, in my sub-mix bus, I've got a little more multiband compression, Pro MB from FabFilter. And this is everything coming from, the instruments to the drums. That's all going through here. And just a master limiter from Arizona. So yeah, that's Carol of the Bells in a nutshell. Yeah, let me know in the comments if you have any more questions or if you're more interested in this type of content. It's always great to learn, everything from the recording process to the mixing process, and get better at the craft and just give back to the community. All right, and don't forget, like, share, subscribe. See you on the next one.